For once, just for once, that much overused word unbelievable seems like the right one to use to describe the journey of a girl who was tweeting about her A-levels just a few weeks ago. A young woman who'd never played in a big tournament before this year, who is now US Open champion. Late last night, the fairy tale of New York came true. After winning the US Open at just 18 years of age, is there nothing that Emma Raducanu can't do? Britain's newest tennis superstar has put a smile on the nation's face as we prepare for winter, with COVID still undefeated. This morning we ask, can it? Will it be better than the last winter? And do the politicians have a plan if infections soar? Good morning. I'm joined this morning by the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, at the start of another big week for him. He has to show the government has got a plan to stop this winter being as grim as the last one. And Jonathan Ashworth, his shadow, also needs to show that Labour has a plan. Last night showed us, of course, there is more to life, much more than coronavirus and politics. And to celebrate Emma Raducanu's incredible win, I'll be joined by tennis legend Martina Navratilova and by Emma's former coach and friend, Matt James. Now, it's a very, very busy news day. To bring you everything from the papers, I'm going to be joined by Jessica Elgot, chief political correspondent at The Guardian. And in the week, the Conservative Party ripped up its manifesto pledges, and many Tory MPs would tell you privately its reputation as a low-tax party. Paul Johnson of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Now, it's me this week as Andrew's got a week off, and we start, as always, with the news headlines from Roger Johnson.
Nick, thank you. Good morning. Our top story today, as Nick's just mentioned, the 18-year-old British tennis superstar Emma Raducanu has won the US Open after a stunning performance in New York last night. The teenager from Bromley made history by beating 19-year-old Leylah Fernandez in 2 sets. It means that Emma Raducanu is the first British woman to win a Grand Slam title in 44 years. She's been congratulated by the Queen for her success, as Joe Wilson reports.
The Borough of Queens and the extraordinary progress of one young woman.
She's been absolutely amazing this whole tournament.
She has a lot of energy.
She's so composed and ruthless.
She's going to smash it.
You know who they're talking about.
Emma Raducanu.
Well, there were 2 teenagers. Both players settled immediately to display a full range of their abilities. Points were hard-earned, skillfully won. Nerves? No sign. 2 was broken early in the second set, broke back like that.
Wow.
Now, did we see any of this coming? 44 years of waiting, 1 hour 51 on court.
It's an absolute dream. Like you just have visions of yourself, you know, going up to the box, hugging everyone. I mean, celebrating. That's something that you always think of and you always work for. And for that moment to actually happen, yeah, I'm just so grateful for my team that are here with me and the team that are back home and the LTA and every single person who supported me along this journey.
These images will be the posters and the posts displayed for decades. If the point of sport is to uplift and to amaze, Emma Raducanu is already at the pinnacle. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
In other news this morning, the Prime Minister is set to announce further details about the government's plan to manage coronavirus in England this winter. Proposals are expected to focus on the use of booster jabs for the most vulnerable people. Boris Johnson will also outline plans to repeal some existing powers which are no longer deemed necessary. The Home Secretary has insisted that she did not break the ministerial code when she met with the boss of a hotel chain and a British Airways executive without any officials present. The Sunday Mirror this morning reports that Priti Patel attended a lunch last month where COVID travel rules were among the topics discussed. Ms Patel resigned from the Cabinet in 2017 amid controversy over her unauthorised meetings with Israeli officials, politicians and the then Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. A spokesman for Ms Patel said that details of her meetings will be published as usual in accordance with the code. And a day of events has taken place in the United States to mark the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. 2 huge pillars of light representing the Twin Towers, which were brought down by hijacked planes, filled the night sky in New York. President Biden and the First Lady also took part in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Pentagon. That's it from me. The next news here on BBC One is at 1 o'clock. Now back to you, Nick.
Thank you very much indeed, Roger. Let's take our first look at the morning front pages. Now, only one image is on the front page of every newspaper, is of course of Emma Raducanu. Dreams really do come true, it says on the front page of the Mail. The paper you've got may not have that because the result came in pretty late last night, but the sense of excitement at this new superstar is there. A lot of news too about the winter plan we're told the government's got coming on COVID. End of PCR travel test, the end of amber, says the Mail on Sunday. The Sunday Times has another story about Prince Charles we'll hear about in a second, but it says vaccine passports are going to be scrapped for the winter. The Sunday Express that the PM is to ease virus laws, and the Observer says that COVID jabs for the young, for 12 to 15-year-olds, set to start, in inverted commas, they've been told, in other words, in 2 weeks' time. The big story of this week, though, was that tax rise, which the Sunday Telegraph is very unhappy with. Poll tax 2.0, it dubs it, will harm jobs and families. The Treasury's own experts admit it's got hold of a document that says that. And then that story that was in the news bulletin there, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, breaking the rules again, is the front page news in the Sunday Mirror. Let's get the take of the papers of our guests this morning, Jessica Elgot of The Guardian, Paul Johnson of the IFS. Jessica, begin us first of all. We'll come to the tennis. I promise you, we'll come to the tennis. But begin first of all with that string of stories, all that briefing clearly coming from Number 10, saying they're easing up on the virus.
Yes, and I think we're going to see some warnings from the government next week that, autumn could be difficult. We could see cases rise, and even double vaccinated people are, getting sick, not sick, perhaps as sick as they would have done. But he's clearly, Boris Johnson wants to signal that there's going to be no winter lockdown. And we're hearing that he's going to axe the government's power to close businesses, to restrict events and gatherings, powers that could disrupt education, maybe even powers to detain infectious people. I think they're going to still keep this legal compunction to stay at home if you test positive for coronavirus. Of course, that's different to all other viruses that you might get, where you might infect people and you might even kill people, but the law doesn't insist that you stay at home.
Jessica, is this about the virus, or is it about your business politics? Is it about ministers looking at their backbenches and thinking, we're never going to get away with this if we keep these laws?
Absolutely, and particularly I think vaccine passports, which we hear that they're about to be binned, and that's been predicted for months just because the Tory backbenches won't stand for it. It's something that clearly Sajid Javid isn't particularly comfortable with himself, the health secretary, and Boris Johnson. It's never really seemed to be something that he's entirely comfortable with, and it was always seen as maybe a nudge to get young people to get the vaccine, and it's not really a surprise that they might be being binned off now.
And yet, Paul, you're a numbers man. If you carry on looking at the numbers, they get more worrying, not less, don't they?
Well, they're certainly not going down, and the numbers are still pretty high. We're looking at 30 to 40,000 cases a day. The numbers that really matter are the hospitalisation cases, which certainly in some parts of the country are going up. And the deaths, I mean, on the Mail's got its list of deaths here, 156 in a day. That's nearly 60,000 in a year, if it were every day through the year. But I guess the story here really is we are thankfully learning to live with this. I mean, this is something that's going to be with us for a while. Government is saying it's lifting restrictions. It's, I think we have decided as a nation that we can live with this level of infection so long as hospitals and the NHS doesn't become overwhelmed. And that's the point where all of this will fall away. If that becomes overwhelmed, and that is the key variable here, then things will change.
Well, that's why we come to this, don't we? This front page story in the Sunday Telegraph. We get back, in other words, to tax this week. The Tories breaking a manifesto pledge, putting up tax, which Sunday Telegraph obviously hates, because they think they've got to save the NHS.
Well, they do. There's two things going on here with this tax rise. A lot of there were two sort of different excuses, as it were. One was we need to fund social care, and the other was the NHS is becoming overwhelmed now, or needs a lot more money. The truth is that, but it was under cover of the pandemic. Now, the truth is that this tax rise is not related to the pandemic at all, actually, because the long-run path of NHS spending isn't going to change, and the social care money was needed in any case. It's something that people like me have been saying for years. We've got a social care problem, we've got a health problem, we've got more older people, we're going to need to raise taxes at some point, and this is the point that it's happening.
And you picked a couple of stories, I know, in the papers there, which show the impact of this. Not enough on social care. You've got a story in The Observer, I think, there.
Yeah, so the Observer is looking at the fact that this is still not necessarily going to be enough for social care, and particularly for local authorities. I mean, we've seen over the last decade funding for local councils falling by more than 20%, funding for social care falling a lot. We've heard a lot about this funding for social care coming in to ease the means test, but a big part of the problem is that even given the means test, there isn't really enough money to go round. People are not getting the social care that they need, and the Observer, I think, is quite rightly saying we could see yet more council tax rises, for example, to fill the gap that's still there.
Interesting. Jess, it's often said, isn't it, where you work in Westminster, that never judge a budget on the day. Look at the fallout a few days later. This was like a budget. The fallout isn't great for the government.
No, it's not. And it seems like the Boris Johnson is completely failing to make the case for this tax rise, which, as Paul said, is almost certainly necessary in order to give the NHS the funding that it needs, in order to try and fix social care. The policy doesn't actually appear to meet either of those tests. As Dominic Lawson makes a point in a good column in the Times, it seems like he's presenting it more about preserving people's inheritance rather than fixing what people can see, people who've got experience of the care system, experience of NHS backlogs, that there are so many more problems to fix in terms of staffing, how well it's paid, the quality of care. We're not really hearing anything from the government about those kind of things, and those are the kind of things that might have made the case better for this kind of tax rise.
But Paul, people are digging into the numbers about who pays and who pays a lot less.
Yeah, and there's a great piece in the Sunday Times called Boomer versus Broke, really talking about this so-called generational war between the young and the old, but actually making the case.
We're the boomers, yeah.
I'm not quite.
Oh, right, okay. I'm a boomer.
By 1 year. By 1 year. But yes, the point that's being made here, some work from Bobby Duffy at King's College, is that yes, there is a strong economic case for younger people to be really pretty fed up. They're not getting on the housing ladder, they're not getting pensions, they're actually worse off in many ways than the previous generation for the first time in many, many generations. But actually there isn't this war, there isn't this big difference, according to his work, between the attitudes of the young and the old, even though the young are paying for them, partly, of course, because young people have parents and grandparents and they actually care about them.
Jess, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, finds herself back on a front page in a way that she really wouldn't want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another meeting that she seems to have held between what is described as a friend of hers, a big hotel chain boss, and BA, and also with the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. He claims it was a constituency matter for him. But again, they're just supposed to have had a kind of casual, informal lunch. But between those people and big players and big topics, as we've heard earlier in the programme, passenger forms, PCR tests, red list countries, it's all going to be things that these businessmen want to know about, and having these kind of informal lunches with cabinet ministers without any kind of civil servant present will raise eyebrows. Whether it'll raise eyebrows from Boris Johnson, he's not the sort, he's not quite the proprietorial kind of prime minister that Theresa May was when she fired Priti Patel.
And just a brief word, it's not just politicians who get into trouble for meeting very rich people. Prince Charles back on the front page of the Sunday Times.
Yes, I know, and again, it's the meetings that Charles seems to have had, the mistakes that he keeps making. It's the question is he unlucky? Is he naive? Or is he just a prince that's had to have a lot of dealings with these kinds of people because of his charitable interest? He's been hanging around waiting to be king for a long time, and frankly, by now he should know better, shouldn't he?
Last word. We've got to have a last word for that extraordinary drama. Did you stay up for it, Paul?
I didn't stay up and watch the tennis, I'm afraid.
OK, I'm looking a bit like this because I had to get up very early, but I couldn't switch it off. It was an amazing moment. How about you, Jess?
she's just such an exciting player to watch, and she's just a brilliant talent. And to see that kind of dedication, she didn't drop it. She didn't drop a set in throughout the whole competition. And she's 18, and she was way down the rankings, and she's only going to be up to, I think, in the 20s now.
And these lovely moments, Paul.
Victory.
A tweet that went round yesterday, went viral last night, was the fact just a few weeks ago she was tweeting about her A-levels.
Yeah, and it's great to see she got an A in her economics and an A star in her maths, which is brilliant to see a sports person who can do the maths and economics as well.
She's got the numbers right. That is the greatest praise that anybody could have. The Institute of Fiscal Study approves. Paul Johnson, thank you very much. Jessica Elgot of The Guardian, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, wasn't summer glorious? At least for the 3 days it lasted. Have we seen the last of all that thing that we used to call the sun? Chris Fawkes is in the Weather Centre.
Hi Nick, well keep the faith. We've had a bit of sunshine already this morning. There's a beautiful sunrise earlier from the North Yorkshire area. And for many of us it is a dry and a bright kind of day today, but not for everyone. In Wales, we've got some rain on the way here, and I think that rain is probably also going to be working in across parts of northwest England, particularly around Greater Manchester, Merseyside, the northwest Midlands, and I think the rain will probably make its way across the Pennines into parts of Yorkshire, so you might see some rain turning up in Sheffield for a time. Further north, a few showers for northern Scotland, but otherwise mostly dry and bright. It does feel a lot cooler and fresher, though, compared with recent days. 14 to 16 degrees for many, given some sunny spells, though, towards the southeast. A little bit warmer, temperatures could get up to about 21 here. Now, overnight tonight, it looks like we'll see some further outbreaks of rain affecting Wales, some western areas of England as well. Clearing skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland will allow temperatures to plummet away. Indeed, it's going to be a cold night here. Temperatures getting down to around 3 or 4 degrees Celsius in the countryside of northeast Scotland, a lot colder than it has been for recent nights. Into tomorrow, well, we've still got some rain on the charts for Wales and Western England. That will turn lighter and patchier through the day, while slowly pushing towards Northern Ireland, so you might get a few spots there. Otherwise, dry and bright for Eastern England. Best of the sunshine probably into parts of Scotland. That's the latest weather. Nick.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. Right, what else could we talk about now but the tennis? Emma Raducanu's incredible win. Early this morning, I spoke to that great Grand Slam champion, former US Open winner Martina Navratilova, who gave me her reaction.
It's extraordinary in many ways because Emma Raducanu just made history. First qualifier ever to win either women's or men's major. The only reason she had to play qualifying because she hadn't played enough tournaments to have a ranking high enough to get in. And that's the other extraordinary thing about her. Her lifetime record before the tournament was 8-3. Her record for this year is 8-3. She's only played this year like 4 or 5 tournaments. It's ridiculous how well she has done. I don't go into superlatives very much. I really tell it like it is, which is, I think, why people like to listen to me. There's no BS. I'm blown away, truly. She's a spectacular tennis player, and she's going to be a superstar.
You said in your commentary at one point, she must have been here before in a previous life.
I felt that because she looks like, the champions do look like they belong from the get-go, right? They're not overwhelmed by the occasion. When they have a big win, they follow it up the next day because they're not done. They're just getting started. So they always look like they belong, but she took it to a whole new level with her, with her emotions and her poise, her thinking. She just doesn't get rattled. She is so switched on in every way, and I'm like, as I say, she came out of the box with all parts all put together already. No batteries needed. She's the whole package. She's got it all going on, and she will still get better. There's places where she can get better in her game, definitely. She's 18, but there are no holes in her game. And at 18, that is extraordinary. So just impressive in every way.
Mentally, she could really easily have lost her nerve, couldn't she? She broke and then was broken back. She lost championship points. She had that fall at the end in which she got a bloodied knee, but she kept it together.
It was so tight because when she slid onto a shot and scraped her knee, and then realized later she was bleeding. So they had to stop the match. She was down a break point for Leylah Fernandez to go back on serve. So this is not a time where either player wanted to stop, because it just breaks up the rhythm. And Emma's serving. She doesn't want to stop. She already had those 2 match points. Again, she could have fallen apart so many different times during today's match, and she just kept it together. She won that point, then Leylah had another break point. And then when she got that match point, I'm thinking to myself, ace, she needs to just finish it with an ace. And lo and behold, she did. It was just, again, such a mature performance for a woman that's played in her 4th tournament. It's ridiculous, really. It just doesn't get any better than this.
There were some, when she pulled out of Wimbledon, who said she hadn't got it mentally. She's silenced those critics, hasn't she?
I very much so. And I said that at the time. I'm like, STFU, because you have no idea what you're talking about. She is a star in the making. This is just a hiccup. Little did I know what a small hiccup it really was in the grand scheme of things here. Yeah, I don't think those people will be talking anything about her mental fitness ever again.
Can she now be amongst the legends, along with the Williams sisters, along with Billie Jean King, along, dare I say it, with Martina Navratilova?
She's got a long way to go. She's just getting started. So, hold your horses. Hall of Famer, of course. The only question is, how many majors will she win? I think she'll be number 1 in the world, most likely. And I think Leylah Fernandez is right up there with her. She is also a great, great talent. Another poised young woman. This is the first time they ever met. It's not the last. This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, to quote a famous line from Casablanca. These two will play maybe 20 times, maybe 50 times, who knows? But they're both superstars, and Emma, the sky's the limit if they stay healthy. That's the biggest question mark, is will they stay healthy? For Emma, for every tennis player, will I stay healthy? You never know. So if the body holds up, sky's the limit.
When you spoke to Emma after the match was over, had it really sunk in?
Well, she's got a lot of obligations now, because in years past, they do the trophy photos the next day somewhere else, iconic photos, like with the Empire State Building behind you or the Eiffel Tower behind you. Now they'll be doing it here tonight. So she was like picking out outfits to do the photo shoot. So then it's just has to do, I think, the drug testing, etc. More press. There's a lot of obligations, but nice problem.
Martina Navratilova, thanks very much indeed for joining us from New York.
Thank you.
What was great is that Martina couldn't wipe the smile off her face, and I'm struggling as well. If you stayed up for the match, it was really extraordinary. Now, Boris Johnson will outline this week the government's plans and preparations for any potential COVID surge this winter. So far, the Labour Party has largely supported pretty much whatever COVID measures the government has taken, although criticised the speed and timing of many of them. Is that going to change? I'm joined in the studio now by the Shadow Health Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Let's start with your overview of this. When you look at winter, we know all the potential problems that cold weather can bring and the return of flu and so on. Are you worried, or do you think we're in a pretty reasonable place?
I think anybody who follows health policy would not be complacent at this stage. Winter is always difficult for the NHS, and we're looking ahead to what could be one of the worst winters in living memory. We obviously got COVID circulating. It's still circulating at a considerable level. There's still questions that still need to be answered about booster jabs and vaccination for children, although we anticipate some of those questions hopefully will get answered in the next few days. And of course, because of the way other viruses work, now we're interacting with one another more than we were last year and the year before. We're likely to see more flu, more RSV, which is a respiratory virus, probably more norovirus as well. So it is very serious.
So does that mean that when the government's briefing as it is, that they won't bring in vaccine passports? You want to criticise them? Or does Labour want to say, actually, we were always pretty wary of vaccine passports, let's not have them?
Well, we always said we didn't think vaccine passports would work for you, or would be appropriate for somebody to go to the shops or go to the pub, or to certainly not appropriate to access public services.
But they were talking about nightclubs, they were talking about big events. Will you be cheering them on if they scrap plans for that? Or do you think they're being reckless?
Well, I think the problem with vaccine passports is people thought that was the key to everything. And the point about nightclubs and crowded events is you've got to have other measures in place. They've got to be well ventilated. You've got to have clean air. And one of the things that we've been arguing for months now, particularly when it comes to school, is put the clean air facilities in place, which is a relatively straightforward thing to do.
Vaccine passports? No? Yes, maybe.
Well, I mean, if the government are not going to bring a vaccine passport piece of legislation to Parliament, that's the end of it, isn't it?
You're not pushing them by the sounds of it. Now, COVID powers, we also hear that they're going to repeal quite a lot of the COVID powers there. Right or reckless in your view?
No, I think look, we've only seen what's been briefed into the newspapers, so we'll have to make a considered view in the round when we see what actually comes to Parliament. But this is about the Coronavirus Act. That is a distinct piece of legislation from all the lockdown pieces of legislation. They get confused, they get conflated, and understandably so. But the Coronavirus Act imposed a number of powers to the authorities to issue penalties and things like that. And there's a lot of evidence that a lot of those powers have been abused. So we're going to have to look at the detail. We're going to have to properly understand it. But at first sight, it looks reasonable. But let me look at the detail when it's all published.
Sounds awfully like, to me, you're changing your tune. It wasn't long ago that you were in this studio talking to Andy about the lifting of all the restrictions. And we'll play it to you, you sounded very worried indeed.
Opening up tomorrow is reckless. It is like
against it.
It's like putting your foot down on the accelerator and throwing off the seat belts. We would open with caution.
You were wrong, weren't you? You said it was reckless to open up in July, and it wasn't reckless. The summer has gone relatively smoothly.
Well, it depends how you define relatively. When we have over 8,000 people in hospital with COVID, I mean, the virus is still circulating and we're still worried about the winter. And remember, the Coronavirus Act is about a different set of powers.
But I'm asking you really about what you said. You said it was reckless then. So people who celebrated the Euros in a pub or in their mate's house, or even went to Wembley, people who enjoyed the summer, are you saying, well, actually, if Labour had been in, we wouldn't have allowed that because we thought it was reckless?
No, we weren't going to ban summer fun. No, most certainly not. But we were advising to maintain mask wearing, to use the summer to install the ventilation systems in schools and so on. And now, as well as we've got a briefing into the papers that we're getting rid of the act, but there's also briefings that there may well be a winter lockdown. Masks may well be coming back.
This is where people find Labour hard to follow, because if it was reckless and you still think it was reckless, shouldn't you now be saying, don't repeal all these powers, bring in new restrictions now because we're worried about the numbers?
No, because we think you need to go further on vaccination. So those pockets of the country, which tend to be the poorer areas where the vaccination rates are not as high as they should be, we need extra effort in there. We need the Chief Medical Officer to give advice quickly on children's vaccinations. And if he gives the green light, we expect it, but if he does, we need to make sure that primary care, our health visitors, our school nurses can roll it out rapidly. And if we have a booster campaign, we need to get on with it. But I would say we need to do it via community pharmacy more this time.
Understood.
Because general practice is so under the cosh at the moment.
You'll know, this has been a week in which, once again, you, Labour, your leader in particular, are being criticised for being sort of commentators on what the government's doing instead of having your own plan. When we look at that tax rise that the government brought in, which you have criticised, can we be clear, would you scrap this new health and social care levy?
Well, it is a punishing, unfair tax rise on working people. A group of people are already getting clobbered with council tax rises, the freeze in the personal allowance. Some of them will see their universal credit cut.
So you'd scrap it?
Well, it's not actually come in yet. There's a vote on Tuesday, and there's still an opportunity for Tory MPs to vote it down. But we would have done it in a different way, because we don't believe this tax rise is fair, and it won't fix social care. Because
surely you should scrap it. You see, what happened to Keir Starmer over the weekend is he talked about other people he taxed, it seemed, in addition. He talked about taxing landlords, for example, pensioners who make their money off savings or pensions rather than from working. So is Labour saying, no, we want extra taxes on top of that tax?
Well, let me tell you what we need to do, because our social care system is broken. It's bust. There'll be viewers today whose mother or father perhaps has got dementia, who have to battle with a complex bureaucratic system to try and get them care. And often the care is turned down, not because the local council is callous, but because it doesn't have the money. There'll be adults with autism and learning disabilities locked in the most appalling, barbaric of conditions. It's like something from the Victorian age. This system does nothing for them. we would put more investment in so people can stay in their home.
More investment? How is the question that people are endlessly asking and not getting an answer
We
to?
would expand access, we would raise quality, because so many care providers are rated inadequate by the CQC. And if you invest so that people can stay in their home longer, not be forced into a home, or not be forced into a hospital bed with nowhere to go, you can release savings. The IPPR has said you could release £2.5 billion worth of savings, which that we would reallocate to the front line.
So Labour is not saying it'll repeal the tax, is saying you'll have more tax on the wealthy, and saying you can save money if you reform.
I'm saying we will have a reform programme to rebuild our broken care services, so that we have national care services that allow people to stay in the home longer, that raise quality, so we don't have these dehumanising flying 15-minute visits, so by paying staff properly as well, a national living wage, and those people trapped in these awful conditions, with adults with learning disabilities, we should care for those in their homes in the community. This is the first time we've heard this proposal. And that will save money as well.
Forgive me, just answer your critics in the Labour Party who say Andy Burnham, when I was last here, in that screen, he came up with a plan for social care. Tony Blair comes up with plans for vaccine passports. Gordon Brown has plans for spreading vaccines around the world. People look to Keir Starmer for a plan, and they often find a vacuum, don't they?
But I'm offering you an alternative approach which will expand access, which will drive up quality. It will also support carers who will look after the people as well, who will get nothing from this tax rise. And I'm saying that by reforming social care in the way we are proposing, that we can release money and put it to the front line by bringing our care services together, our national care services together, to work hand in hand with our NHS as well.
John Ashworth, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come into the studio. Thank you. Now, how on earth did she do it? From qualifier to champion, from studying for her A-levels to becoming the Queen of Queens. Emma Raducanu was seeded outside of the world's top 300 just 3 months ago. She is now US Open champion. The journey began at Bromley Tennis Centre. Her coach there, who worked with her all the way up to her breakthrough at Wimbledon, was Matt James, and he joins us on the line now. Morning to you, Matt. Have you had much sleep?
Not yet. No, there might be a croaky voice, but I'll try my best to get through it for you.
Yeah, and did you have a chance to chat to Emma after an extraordinary victory?
Not quite yet. I've had a few messages with her dad and head of women's tennis, Ian Bates. I've heard that they're celebrating out there, so I'll leave her to it and hopefully see her when she gets back.
You're there at the place it started, at Bromley Tennis Centre. Lots of people expressing this disbelief about her becoming an overnight success. Isn't the truth that it always takes years of hard work to become an overnight success?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of hard yards put into her, and a lot of people really only found out about her at Wimbledon. But she's been part of the LTA kind of pathway since sort of age 8, 9, 10. So a lot of us in the tennis world have kind of heard about her, seen her, and she was part of camps and our pro scholarship program. So we've kind of got to see her while she's been doing well behind the scenes. But yeah, this breakthrough since Wimbledon, I think she's kind of a bit of a celebrity now.
And what did you see when she was a young girl playing with you? What was it you saw in her game, in her attitude, that made you think she's a winner, even if you didn't predict this?
Well, I saw her when she was 15, so actually she was here at Bromley up until that point. But I got to see her when she was at Junior Wimbledon, and she actually played Layla. The first time I saw her, she beat Layla, and yeah, it was a similar kind of mindset. She's ruthless, really competitive, gives nothing away to opponents, and you see how aggressive she is and on the court, and you could kind of tell straight away that there's a little bit of a superstar. And when you then get on court with her and realise that she's a really bright girl and learns so quickly, that's when it gets quite exciting for a coach. And yeah, but the journey's been an unbelievable one for her.
You say she's a really bright girl. In the build-up to that Wimbledon tournament, her mind appeared to have been on. She was tweeting about whether she'd have to sit her A-levels or not. She's someone who has managed somehow to get ready for these huge tournaments while doing pretty well in her work.
That's how she rolls. She wants to do kind of A-star in whatever she's doing, whether that's her exams or tennis. She's all in. you know, she won't be too happy if she doesn't get that A star, and that's what we're seeing, that when you combine that kind of determination and focus and kind of hard work with a bright girl who's talented, then this is the result. And you know, it's no surprise that she did really well in the exams, but what's surprising is then to come off the back of that, having actually not played as much as the girls, to then go and do what she's done is, yeah, you know, we like an underdog, but this is something else.
Matt, you were with her at Wimbledon, I know, and there were some, you'll know who we're talking about, who when she was forced to withdraw from that match said she's not got it. She hasn't got the mental composure. She's not got the attitude she needs for the top game. Are you watching, Piers Morgan? What did you think of that at the time?
Yeah, at the time it's difficult because, you know, unless you've been in that situation, which none of us have, you know, it's difficult to really comment on it. And, you know, some of the things she had to deal with, obviously the British public being, you know, all eyes on her, and even being under the roof, it was a different atmosphere on that match, and the way the match was going, that it was, you know, so sort of close, and she had chances to go up. And yeah, until we're in that situation, we don't know how we'd react. But you know, what she's done is obviously used that, and that, you know, this is where she learned so quickly. She'll have used that, and that experience that she's got from there has helped her then go on to places like Arthur Ashe and just be completely herself, which is credit to her.
Matt, we can see them lining up behind you, learning today. You obviously want to make sure that this isn't just a moment that we can treasure, but that she's an inspiration to lots of players who'll join you at Bromley and tennis centres right around the country. Do you think this time it will make a difference?
Yeah, of course. You know, I'm hearing, wherever I go at the moment, that's all I can hear is Emma Raducanu, whether it's if I'm at a tennis club or not. But yeah, she's going to inspire so many people, you know, starting with these youngsters behind us, you know, here at Bromley, which is great. And, you know, all I can say is, you know, the LTA youth sort of program has just gone out, and that's where these kids can start playing and getting onto courses, and, you know, that's what we want to see. And I know the LTA are working hard with the government to get a lot more courts kind of redeveloped and get them in sort of a good state of play to get as many players on the courts to use this, because she will have inspired a lot of players to pick up a racket, but also flipping it, the players, the current British crop who are looking to break through, you know, this will inspire them hopefully that they can do it, because it's such a whirlwind. You know, they've been practicing with her and seeing her for the last few years. You know, why not have, you know, a few more players in the top 100?
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Matt James, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Bromley, and congratulations to you and your team as well. Now, the new Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was criticised a few weeks into his job for tweeting, after recovering from COVID himself, the words, "Please, if you haven't yet, get your jab as we learn to live with rather than cower from this virus." He later apologised for the choice of language, but to many it did signal something very important, that this Health Secretary takes a rather different approach to his predecessor when it comes to balancing the health risks of COVID against the economic and social damage caused by restrictions. I'm delighted to say the Health Secretary joins us now in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Can I begin by asking you the question I asked at the beginning of this programme? Is the winter we're looking at going to be like last winter, or are you hopeful it will feel quite a lot better than that?
I'm hopeful, of course, but we need to prepare for it, because you know, COVID and other viruses, they like the autumn and they like the winter, and that's why later this week the Prime Minister will be setting out our plans to manage COVID and other health threats during the winter. And what we'll make clear is that our first line of defence remains the vaccine programme. Has been enormously successful. Over 80% of over 16s have had their double jabs. Far more have had at least one jab, and that remains vital. We still want people to come forward. So if there's anyone listening that still hasn't had their jab, please do come forward. Those jabs are working. But alongside that, we've got this testing infrastructure, this huge sort of juggernaut of a machine providing tests up and down the country. We've got new treatments that we didn't have in the last winter, and we've got a surveillance system that's the envy of the world. So all of this is working together to protect us.
I want to take you through in a second all the various things in your toolbox, if you like, if you're worried about the virus. But let's just stick with where you think we are now. There are reasons for being a bit more optimistic. We get Christmas this year, do we?
Yeah, of course we get Christmas.
We get Christmas. We don't get lockdowns?
I'm not anticipating any more lockdowns. I think it'd be irresponsible for any health minister around the world to take everything off the table. But I just don't see how we get to another lockdown.
And yet, when people see the data sometimes they do worry. And I wonder if you're worried. We're hearing reports of, for example, that we've got the highest number of COVID patients in hospital since March, and there are certain hospitals that, in Cornwall, for example, having to cancel urgent operations. Are you seeing things in the health service that are beginning to worry you?
Look, the NHS is under significant pressure. There's no doubt about that. We still have over 6,000 patients in England for symptoms of COVID. We have obviously many other patients coming in and out, but a huge pressure on A&E as well. So there's a lot of pressure there, and we've got to do everything we can to support the NHS. But as we now move into the autumn and the winter, because of the vaccination programme, some of the other measures that I hope we can take, so for around boosters, for example, to deal with some of the issues around waning immunity, I think that's all going to add to our defences.
Well, let's go through this toolbox, as it's often referred to. And jabs is obviously the central tool that you're relying on. I know you have to wait for advice on these things, but how soon could you roll out jabs for school children if the Chief Medical Officers for England and the rest of the UK approve?
Well, the advice that I've received so far, which is from the JCVI, which is our sort of committee of experts, they gave their advice and said that they thought there were other issues that needed to be looked at. They recommended to me that I get the chief medical officers of the UK to give me their advice, which is what I'm waiting for. Now, that's independent advice.
But if they give it,
if they give it, we will be able to start within a week of getting advice that says go ahead and then making that your final government decision.
So jabs in the arm of school children could come very soon.
Yeah, I think it's been sensible to ask the sort of education system, the schools vaccination service, to plan for that. They've been planning for it throughout the summer, just in case we get that advice, so we can hit the go button without any further delay.
And what about booster jabs for older people? Because you've given them, we know, for people who are particularly vulnerable, but there's not a booster jab programme. If that is approved, you can do it quickly.
Yeah, I want to see a broad booster programme. And the initial advice that I received a few weeks back, again from the JCVI, suggested that is what we should do. They asked for more time to look at how that booster programme could work, so which vaccine should be used depending on what your first vaccine was and all of that. And I think it's right. They also wanted to look at whether you could co-administer it with flu jabs, which flu is going to be really important, protecting ourselves against that this winter. So I'm waiting for their final advice. But from what I've seen in terms of preparations, I think we will be ready to go. In fact, I'm confident we'll be ready to go this month, as I planned all along.
The curious thing about today is the front pages of newspapers are full of briefings that have obviously come from the government about reducing the way in which we are protected from COVID. Can you clear this up on vaccine passports? It is only 2 days ago that Nhs Targets, the vaccine minister, says that he didn't like vaccine passports, but it is the right thing to do. Has it overnight become the wrong thing to do?
There's no overnight about it. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of defences, as we've just gone through some of them, that we need to keep in place here, because this virus hasn't gone anywhere. There's still a pandemic, so of course we need to remain cautious. But we just shouldn't be doing things for the sake of it or because others are doing it. We should look at every possible intervention properly. So you asked about vaccine passports. So I think it's fair to say, I think most people probably instinctively don't like the idea. I mean, I've never liked the idea of saying to people, you must show your papers or something to do what is just an everyday activity. But we were right to properly look at it, to look at the evidence.
But you're not doing it.
Well, what I can say is that we've looked at it properly, and whilst we should keep it in reserve as a potential option, I'm pleased to say that we will not be going ahead with plans for vaccine passports.
You will not be going ahead. So
we will not be going ahead.
This is baffling for people. I mean, the Culture Secretary said just a day or two ago, it'll go ahead for nightclubs, it might go ahead for other big venues. The Vaccines Minister was in Parliament saying, I don't much like it, but it's the right thing to do. And now you're coming here saying, well, let's not do it.
Well, I think we're absolutely right to look at it. Other countries have used this measure or looked at it and discounted it, but they've had it.
Use it. I mean, they're very common in France. You know that they're coming in.
They are, but it should be looked at in combination with other measures. So many countries at the time they implemented it was to try and boost their vaccination rates, and you can understand why they might have done that. we've been very successful with our vaccination rates so far. Obviously, there's more to do. But just as an example, if I may, just last month, I announced that we were going to, for the first time, start vaccinating 16 and 17-year-olds. We're already at around 55% in a few weeks. Now, I want to go further.
But know there are 6 million people who could have the jab and have not yet had the jab. There are parents now hearing that their children will be offered the jab. And they may say, look, the Secretary of State, the Prime Minister are running scared of Tory backbenchers who beat up the vaccine minister in Parliament on Wednesday when he said he was going to introduce vaccine passports. They're running scared, and my child might have to have a vaccine because they're too scared of their own backbenchers.
No, look, people could say that, but they would be entirely incorrect
Why
to do
have you dropped
so.
the policy in the space of 2
Because
days?
it's not. It's a policy that we've been looking at for a while, or throughout the summer. We've been looking at the evidence, which I think anyone would expect us to do. But you've got to look at it alongside the whole toolbox. What else we are doing, and as I say, the vaccine program, our testing program, our surveillance program, the new treatments that the NHS has been purchasing and offering for the first time. This is all our wall of defence, and whilst there's still a lot of virus around, it's working.
Other defences we think are going to come down. So the PCR test that people have to have if they travel to what's called an amber list country, that's going to go, is it?
We haven't said that, but I want to get rid of that test as soon as I possibly can. So I have asked for advice on it, because we should only keep measures in place if they are absolutely, totally necessary. Now, that might sound obvious to most people, but that's not always how government works in the past. So I think sometimes governments do things and they sort of get a bit too used to it. And I just think all these measures should be kept under review. We should be taking the best public health advice that there is and making our decisions
what you're
based
seeking
on that.
advice on, forgive me, to be clear, what you'd be saying is either we'll say don't go to a country unless it's absolutely necessary, or you can go and you won't have to have all those expensive tests.
I'd like people to be able to travel to whatever country they want to visit for whatever reason they visit. It should be no business, in a normal world, it should be no business of the government. But everyone understands why we've had to have a different approach in the last year or so. But that extra burden on people, the cost of a PCR test to a typical family going on holiday is horrendous. And we, I want to take that away as soon as I can, but it must be based on the public health advice.
What might worry people is you're talking about having a toolbox of things to deal with cases going up. And you've just given me 2 examples where you're throwing tools out the window. We don't need that, we don't need this. And now you're talking about getting rid of some of the legal powers as well.
Well, we should keep all these tools under constant review, and they, where they are no longer necessary, we should remove them. Of course we should. So, for example, this week, one of the things the Prime Minister will be announcing is that there are some of the measures, some of them, in the Coronavirus Act, which was by necessity an emergency act. There were emergency powers. And to be fair to my colleagues at the time, I wasn't in government. I think we had to take a lot of these powers because you weren't entirely sure where the virus was going to lead us, what was necessary. And we've learned through that process. So some of those powers, for example, the power to shut down a business, to shut down education settings, to require certain restrictions around people that are infectious. A lot of these powers can go, and we should dispose of them. But some of them are necessary to keep, such as requiring people to self-isolate if they test positive. We will keep that power. And I think people understand that when you don't need a power, get rid of it. If it's still justified, go out there in the public gallery, set out why you need it, and also say that you're always going to keep it under review.
You see, what might worry people is that the Prime Minister again and again has been far too optimistic about this virus, hasn't he? Again and again, he says it's all going to be fine, it's going to be fine by Christmas, we're going to open up, don't you worry, we don't need this. You said when you got the job, let's not cower. Are the Tories doing it again?
No, I think if you look back just a few weeks ago, you just had Jonathan Ashworth here, and as you rightly pointed out, when we took step 4 back in July, it was one of the first decisions I made was to get rid of almost all our sort of domestic rules around social distancing and others. That when we made that, the opposition and others said this is reckless, this is going to be absolutely the wrong decision, and time will prove it. But of course, the virus is still around. Of course, sadly, some people have still died, and there are hospitalizations. But as we took that decision, I think we've proven that we've taken the right decision based on the evidence that we had. Now, we've got to remain cautious. This virus is alive and kicking around the world, and we've got to keep our defences in place, but the ones that work and that are necessary.
There's a suspicion here there's a whole lot of politics going on here. Your backbenchers don't like it. They don't like the government very much. much at the moment because of what you've done on tax, which we'll come to in a second. You want to give the impression to the newspapers that you're doing it. The truth is, most of what you need to do to lock people up is nothing to do with the Coronavirus Act at all, is it? You can suspend the whole lot. The Public Health Act allows you to lock down Britain if that's what you want to do, and that will stay on the statute book.
Well, the Public Health Act stays where it is.
So you've got all the powers you could want to lock people down.
Factually, where you're right, Nick, is that the powers that were used for the sort of lockdown basis, those were powers based on the Public Health Act. And the Public Health Act has been there long before coronavirus, and it's a necessary act for emergency powers. But a lot of what was done in the last couple of years was based on the Coronavirus Act. It was an emergency act, and the government said at the time that the measures will be temporary, and as soon as we can get rid of them, we will, and we will keep them under constant review. That is what a government should do. We should not be intruding on people's day-to-day lives unless it is absolutely, totally necessary, and that is why this approach is the right one.
Do you not worry a little bit? You will know that in Scotland, the NHS is run by the Scottish Government, not by you, but in Scotland, we're seeing ambulances queuing outside hospitals for 3 hours before people can get in. Do you not worry that you are giving people the impression that you can get rid of a lot of the restrictions on their lives? And that is precisely what might happen to the NHS in England and could happen very soon.
Look, I do worry, of course, about the pressures on the NHS, and you've taken Scotland as an example. And although I don't run that NHS, I do want our Scottish colleagues to do well. And by the way, we work very closely with them and provide support. But you have a joint vaccination program, for example, which shows the strength of this union when it comes to fighting this virus. But I think we need to always be on top of the pressures in the NHS, and that is, you want to come to it, so let's get to it.
Yeah.
What we announced this week, this record settlement for support for the NHS and our social care system. This is happening, by the way, because of all those restrictions we had, the ones that some people are saying, why did you remove? It also meant that there were many, many millions of people, we estimate at least 7 million, that would have come forward to the NHS with their heart problems, their cancer problems, their weight problems, all sorts of problems, and they stayed away because they were asked to stay away. And what about their health problems?
Well, let's talk
it's
about
not just about COVID.
Yeah.
What about all those health problems?
Well, let's talk about them, because often the experience for people, if they do come forward, the experience, which is horrific, is to be told that your care is non-urgent, but it feels pretty blooming urgent to you if you need a new hip or a new knee or cataracts or gynaecologicals. Let's just look at the figures on waiting lists. Here, 293,000 waiting more than a year. Now, of course, you'll say we've had a pandemic. You will know there were record waiting lists before the pandemic under this government. How soon can you get those waiting lists down?
Well, first of all, they will go up before they go down. I've been very clear about that. The NHS has been very clear about that. Why is the case? Because although the NHS is open, it's there for you in a way it wasn't in the last year or so because of COVID. Those people that didn't come forward, I want them to come forward. So that's 7 million I refer to that didn't get their cancer checked, didn't get those hip replaced. I want them to come forward, and I want them to come forward now. That will put more pressure on the NHS.
So but
it gives the NHS an opportunity to get them into the system and start helping those people. So it will get worse before it gets better.
Let me show you one more thing, though. Let's see here what you're told as a patient in the NHS in England. You're told that there is a guarantee that I think we can see there. You've got the right to start your treatment within a maximum of 18 weeks from referral. Now, you will know 1 in 3 patients have to wait longer than that now. Is that target dead? Are you going to replace it with a new target? How will we know that the NHS...
Well, that target, and actually many others, they haven't been met in the last 18 months because of the global pandemic. I think most people understand
Let's remember, waiting lists almost doubled under the Conservatives before anybody had heard the word pandemic.
But what we've seen during the pandemic, the waiting list has gone up to 5.6 million now. As I said, it will get higher. It was over 4 million before the pandemic. This new settlement will help us to tackle that, paying for some 9 million new treatments, scans and checks. So it's going to make a huge difference. But just on targets, by the way, can I just say this? I've had a couple of months now to review NHS targets. And I've got to say, looking at the targets that have been set under successive governments, long before we had COVID, Some of them are wrong. They're just nonsense. Some of these targets...
Just a headline. Do they all go?
No,
or are you
they
going to
don't all
them?
go. We need a proper review of targets because, it's the act of a lazy politician just to set some target that gives them a good short-term headline that actually leads to the NHS going backwards and not looking after patients. I'd rather have clinicians, doing their clinical work, helping patients, rather than sitting there filling in forms all day.
I want to give you the chance to talk about the other half of your announcement, which was on social care. Now, there are big announcements you've had conversations with about people losing their houses, but for most people, the crisis is here and now. Let's just hear from someone who depends on the social care system. Edith. She's 34. She was diagnosed with MS when she was 16, and she simply can't look after herself. She can't do the basics unless she has a carer.
Yeah.
Either I'm stuck in bed or I'm stuck in my clothes at wheelchair overnight. Both my first two care agencies, they stopped being able to service my town because of lack of staff. My social worker was telling me that if a care agency couldn't be found, I'd have to move into a care home.
In other words, more staff, more money. The Conservatives who run local government say there is no more money. Things will get worse under this plan in the short term, not better.
The changes we announced this week are precisely for people like Edith. That is a horrible disease to have. And that is also an example of working age adults now are over half of spending on adult social care. They will be able to have better, more generous means testing and have their lifetime costs capped and more support.
But that's if she moves into a home in the future. She wants staff. She wants help now.
This applies to your costs whether you're in a home or not in a home.
1 in 10 people are being moved into homes, often, against their will, because there simply aren't enough staff to attend them when they're in their own home. Are you saying that councils should put up their council tax, because that seems to me the only way they can do it, in order to fund more help for people like Edith?
What I'm saying is we do need more carers. There's a shortage of carers. We need better trained carers. And that is why with this package, we'll be able to do a lot of that, including having councils pay a fairer cost of care and £500 million to workforce training and creating 700,000 more training. No, this is money that's included in this package.
County councils run by Conservatives tell us they will be putting council tax out because they're not getting the money they need. Which brings us finally to the issue of the fairness of what was announced this week. If there's someone who is helping Edith, if there's someone helping Edith, what will happen as a result of what you've announced this week is that she will pay that carer a lot more in national insurance. And very soon, she's probably got universal credit because she's on low wage. She'll get £20 a week taken away. The calculation we've got is that she will be over £1,000 worse off as a result of the government's announcement. It's simply not fair, is it?
Well, I don't know where you get that calculation from. What I can say is that when you raise taxes for any public service, it should be the very last thing you do. If there's anything else that you can do to prevent that, provide savings elsewhere, for example, that's what you should do. What you shouldn't do to raise it instead of taxes is to just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. That would be wrong as well. And so the way this has been done through a broad-based progressive tax is the fairest way possible to support us all for our health needs and our care needs.
Your dad came to this country, often talked about him, with almost no money. He saw Margaret Thatcher as his champion. You, in government, are taxing, I put it to you, people like him. Working people are paying more while the wealthy don't pay more.
We are protecting people with the people that particularly would be vulnerable, and we are doing it in a way that that people would respect, that we are sticking to our promises to look after the NHS and look after them with their health and their old age.
Sajid Javid, Health Secretary. Thank you very much indeed. That's all from me today. Andrew will be back next week. Thanks for watching.